How to Read People Like a Book, a guide to speed reading people, understand body language and emotions, decode intentions, and connect effortlessly. Introduction. Thank you for purchasing this book. As the title tells you, this book is all about learning how to read people like a book in order to connect effortlessly with individuals. I can't stress this latter part enough. I want this book to help you connect with people, forge relationships, and for the most part, strengthen your ties with others around you. My name is James, and I have been studying body language and verbal communication for a very long time. I got started after being interested in TV shows that seemed to glamorize body language and profiling. I used to suffer from severe shyness and social anxiety, and so I thought learning how to read people would help me connect with them easier. As I learned, there is really nothing glamorous about it, the process being grounded on cold science and research. Still, I am happy to share what I know with you, especially since it helped me so much in life. Learning to read between the lines allowed me to advance in work, marry the woman of my dreams, have a good relationship with my kids, and be fulfilled in many of my social circles. Knowing how to properly communicate with people is the hallmark of good relationships. These methods that you're about to learn have given me the kind of deep relationships that I could only dream about before. So what's the problem really? Why do we find it so hard to connect and communicate with people? A good reason is because what people say isn't always what they mean or even what they want to say. This can lead to mixed signals, confusion, and everyone ending up getting something they really don't want to get. Let's look at a real-world view for once. Have you ever conducted a presentation and found people dozing off or not paying attention? Have you ever had problems with your boss for reasons that you just can't grasp? Perhaps your boss latches on quickly to suggestions made by a coworker when you suggested the exact same thing before. Or let's look at your dating life. Do you always strike out with women? Do you find yourself unsure of what to do or what to say during a date? Do you have a hard time figuring out if a girl is also into you? These are all problems that can be solved with just the right amount of insight. When it comes to body language will tell you at what point your boss has lost interest or which part of the presentation is perceived as boring by your office mates. It can also tell you when a girl is interested even before you walk towards her in a bar. Knowing all these gives you the chance to assess and change direction as needed. It can help you formulate your techniques depending on what the audience needs. Simply put, it can help you achieve goals through subtle but effective means. This isn't pseudoscience either. Studies have shown that body language has a huge impact on day-to-day conversations. A large part of human communication is done through body language. In fact, there are even classes that teach men how to alter their body language to help them attract more women. There are also classes that teach CEOs and managers how to become more assertive in a particular setting. The good news is that you don't have to spend thousands and go to those classes to learn techniques. This book can help you with those and so much more. In this book, I intend to help you figure out different personality types and the unique traits each one has, communicating with different personality types, how to read body language, how to understand verbal cues, and of course, how to train yourself to become a better reader of the people around you. I want you to be able to achieve bigger and better things through this book. So, don't wait around. Flip over to the next page. Chapter 1. Explanation, quotes, facts. People are an endless source of interest. Why they think what they think or why they do what they do has created an entire branch of science called personality psychology. It's basically a branch of psychology that studies personality and how it's different from one person to the next. It deals with the construction of a coherent picture of an individual, their psychological process, psychological differences, psychological similarities, and human nature. Simply, it tries to answer these 5 questions. What personality traits make up a person? How does a person think? What makes one personality different from another? What makes one personality similar with another? What personality traits are already present from the moment a person is born? It seems like such a simple 5-question study, but it's actually such a big field that I doubt this book will be able to discuss everything about people. However, we will try to focus our discussion on how personality affects communication with other people. More importantly, we're going to talk about how you can forge a connection with different personalities through both verbal and nonverbal communication. What is personality? Personality has many definitions, but for this book, we're going to define it as a set of characteristics possessed by an individual. This set of characteristics influences a person's cognition, emotion, motivation, behavior, and environment. Hence, the way you behave often changes depending on who you are, where you are, and who you're with. In fact, the word personality originated from the Latin word persona, which means mask. This is why people often say they wear different masks, depending on different situations. Studies targeted towards defining, describing, and categorizing personality have been in existence for many years. In case you didn't know, the ever-popular zodiac signs are actually a way of categorizing personality based on the date of your birth. Of course, since this way of categorizing personality isn't backed by science, we won't be talking about it. Instead, we shall be focusing on the ones with lots of studies behind them: introvert and extrovert. This is perhaps the most common classification known today. The common belief is that introverts are quiet and extroverts are loud. However, that's actually just a manifestation of what makes each personality unique. The main difference between an extrovert and an introvert is based on how their brains operate. That's right, this goes all the way to the brain and has the scientific studies to prove it. Studies show that the extrovert's dopamine trigger is shorter. Dopamine is the body's happy hormone, and accordingly, stimulation for extroverts run the path of taste, touch, visual, and auditory sensory processing. It's quick and very much felt by all five senses. This is why when extroverts gamble, the rush they get is stronger and faster. Introverts, on the other hand, run a more complicated course. The pathway area goes through planning, remembering, and solving problems. What does this all mean? Well, extroverts have a brain makeup that encourages them to seek rewards, while the same does not hold true for introverts. Of course, this seems like such a vague explanation. So how else can we make a distinction? Perhaps a better way of explaining the difference is in terms of energy. How do introverts and extroverts gain energy, and how do they recharge? You see, introverts recharge best alone. Being with people saps their energy, and in order to bring that energy back up, they need to be alone. Extroverts are the complete opposite. If they're alone for long periods of time, it feels as though their energy is being drained. Hence, extroverts need to socialize with other people in order to recharge their energy. It's really that simple. This is why even if a person is an introvert, they can still socialize with others, participate in parties, and go to different occasions. In the same way, some extroverts can be overcharged so that they may need some quiet alone time. Hence, I don't want you to think that extroverts never want quiet moments or that introverts never want to be with other people. Both personalities are capable of jumping to the other side if given the chance, but their default setting means they will go back if they find the need to. This difference between the two types will tell you how you want to communicate or force a connection with a person. For example, if you're planning a birthday party for an introvert, a small quiet event would be closer to their style. They are also more likely to appreciate gifts that they can enjoy alone, and when setting a meeting with an introvert, you would want to pick a quiet spot with little music and enough privacy for a personal conversation. On the flip side, an extrovert would appreciate a gift that encourages socialization or activities that involve great adrenaline rushes. Forging a connection with an extrovert can mean a trip to the local bar or a local festival. Later on in this book, we'll talk more about how introverts and extroverts appreciate human connection and what makes them tick. Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. If you do a quick search on Facebook, you'll find dozens or even hundreds of Facebook groups dedicated towards the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator or the MBTI personality test. It was popularized by Carl Jung and was once used by companies for hiring purposes. Carl Jung is the main proponent of this personality typing and was a psychoanalyst and psychiatrist who founded analytical psychology. Under the MBTI personality characterization, the introvert and extrovert classifications have been expanded. Instead of the traditional introvert versus extrovert, personalities are now typed depending on 8 different categories. Under the MBTI school of thought, you can either be introverted or extroverted, sensing or intuitive, thinking or feeling, perceiving or judging. There are actually online tests for this that will tell you your personality type, and will even describe what kind of person you are, how you think, how you perceive the world, and so on. In total, there are 16 personality types under the MBTI principle. How does this work? For example, the test shows that you're an introvert, an intuitive, a thinker, and judging. This means that your personality type is INEJ. You'll notice that we're capitalizing the letter N in intuitive because this helps make the distinction between the other I in the personality type. On the flip side, you may also be an extrovert, an intuitive, a sensor, and a perceiver, which makes you an ENSP. You see where this is going? All possible combinations of these characteristics churn out 16 different personalities, and each personality has its own unique charm and, of course, its own unique vice. What I want you to understand, however, is that ESFP is not the automatic opposite of INEJ just because all the letters are flipped. It's far more complicated than that, which is why it can be tough to fully explain, but we'll definitely try. The question here is, why are there so many personality types? Carl Jung once said, "There's no such thing as a pure extrovert or introvert. Such a person should be in a lunatic asylum." This is perhaps why there has been an expansion of the classic introvert and extrovert scenario. Now, we don't just look at how you process energy, but also how you process thoughts, feelings, and so on. Chapter 2, Problems and Benefits. In this chapter, we're first going to talk about the advantages and pitfalls of reading body language. The fact is that body language is an inexact science, and as much as it can be useful, it can also be detrimental in your social life. Here are some of the things you need to watch out for. The impact of culture. One thing I want you to also consider is the impact of culture and body language. When trying to communicate with people, whether verbally or non-verbally, you will find that there are certain actions unique to their culture or the environment they grew up in. For example, in Asian countries, bowing is seen as a sign of respect, while in American countries, the typical bow has been shortened to a simple nod of the head to someone. Also note that in Asian countries, the depth of the bow indicates the depth of respect one might have for the other person. What do the letters mean? Since we already talked about the introvert versus extrovert situation, we won't be describing that one in the listing. Here are what the other letters mean when it comes to MBTI. Sensing, if you're this type, this means that you become aware of specific facts first, or you prefer to focus on the precise details. This also means that you rely primarily on your 5 senses and use them to move forward, perceive your surroundings, and come up with decisions. Intuitive, denoted by the letter N. This means that you prefer to focus on the big picture first and plan accordingly. Intuitives also rely heavily on hunches or intuition when perceiving their surroundings. Thinkers, this talks about the process by which you arrive at a decision. Sensing or intuition is the way you receive the message. Thinking or feeling is how you process that message. Thinkers use logical analysis to process the message they receive. Feeling, on the other end of the spectrum, are the feelers, who primarily use emotions. They consider the values of everyone involved and try to hit a harmony with them. Judging people are those who want their life to be planned out. You want to create a plan A, plan B, plan C, or any other backup that might be necessary to achieve your goal. Perceivers. These people are the ones who prefer to go with the flow. You want to keep your options open and change them accordingly. Later on, we'll talk about this some more, but from the general look of things, You can already tell how this personality classification can help guide you in connecting with others. Enneagram personality typing. Under the Enneagram of Personality School of Thought, there are a total of 9 different personality types. All of these are interconnected with each other and were principally derived from the teachings of a Chilean psychiatrist, Claudio Naranjo. Like the MBTI, the Enneagram was also used in business management to help business owners gain insight into their employees and their fitness for specific roles. Nowadays, it's not considered as a huge determining factor for hiring, but some companies may still use it to guide their hiring process. Here's a rough look at the different personality types as defined under the Enneagram system. 1. The reformer. Rational, principled, purposeful, perfectionist, self-controlled, and idealistic. 2. The helper. Caring, demonstrative, generous, possessive, people-pleasing, and interpersonal. 3. The achiever. Success-oriented, adaptive, excelling, image-conscious, driven, and pragmatic. 4. The individualist. Sensitive, expressive, dramatic, temperamental, self-absorbed, and withdrawn. 5. The investigator. The cerebral type, perceptive, secretive, isolated, innovative, and intense. 6. The loyalist. Committed, engaging, anxious, suspicious, responsible, and security-oriented. 7. The enthusiast. Busy, fun-loving, versatile, scattered, distractible, and spontaneous. 8. The challenger. Dominating, decisive, confrontational, self-confident, willful, and powerful. 9. The peacemaker. Easygoing, receptive, reassuring, complacent, agreeable, and self-effacing. That's just a basic outline of the typology. Later on, we'll talk about this further so you'll find out exactly how to best connect with each type. Keirsey Temperament Sorter. Known as the KTS, this personality typing system is slightly related to the MBTI and had a big impact in the hiring practices of some of the biggest businesses in the world. For example, at some point corporations like Coca-Cola, 7-Eleven, IBM, Bank of America, and even the U.S. Air Force use this personality assessment technique. Under this principle, there are basically 4 temperaments divided into 2 categories and with 2 types each. Hence, just like the MBTI, there's a total of 16 types under the Keirsey system. Beautifully, these 16 personalities also correlate with the 16 personalities found in the MBTI personality classification, albeit with different names. Here's a rough outlook of these personality types. Artisans. Artisans want to make an impact with an adaptable personality that makes them excellent in troubleshooting. They're known for their agile abilities and excellence in using instruments, tools, and equipment needed for whatever goal they may have in mind. They often seek virtuosity and stimulation with their greatest asset being the ability to develop tactics to meet their needs. Artisans fall into 2 different roles. The entertainers, these are the informative or reactive artisans. This basically means that their intelligence is catered towards improvising, allowing them to adapt to a situation as it comes. Entertainers are further classified into composers and performers. The operators, these are the proactive or directive artisans. What makes them distinctive is the unique talent to expedite a process or basically make activities go quicker without losing much of the goal. They are further divided into crafters and promoters. Guardians, these are the ones who like things scheduled and organized. They want security and value responsibility in themselves and other people. They're excellent at logistics and make good supporters and facilitators. They branch out into 2 different roles. The administrators, they're the ones who are proactive, with an intelligence developed towards regulation. They're further classified into inspectors and supervisors. The conservators, known as the reactive guardians, they are best when put in roles of support. Classifications of this type include protectors and providers. Idealists, they are both compassionate and abstract. Their motivations, center towards personal growth and meaning. Because of their unique connection with themselves, they are excellent when put into roles requiring diplomacy. They have two different roles, which are the mentors. These are the ones who are best in developing roles. As the name suggests, they're perfect in guiding people and helping them to develop into their full potential. Role variants are counselors and teachers. The advocates, as the name suggests, this role of the idealist is centered towards mediation. They're advocates that are excellent in bridging the gap between people. Role variants include healers and champions. Rational, they're the ones who are both objective and abstract. Their main goal includes self-control and mastery of whatever they need to achieve. People who fall under this personality type value knowledge and competence above all else. Greatest strength is strategy and the ability to approach problems from a logical standpoint. They fall into two roles. Coordinators, their intelligence is primarily developed towards arranging. Role variants include masterminds field, marshals, engineers, excellent at constructing. The engineers have the following role variants: architects and inventors. Later on, we'll talk more about these personality types and how to make connections with them. The spectrum of all personality types. I can't stress this enough. Personality is a spectrum. This means there's no set or permanent personality type. A person isn't 100% introvert or extrovert. This is merely a preference. Hence, given the option, a person will display the characteristics of an introvert, but if they have to, they can display extroverted characteristics as well. So why is this problematic? Well, if you're trying to communicate with someone of a different background, you will have to do your research on their culture, what gestures are considered proper, and which ones are a show of respect. While the other person may understand that you're from a different background too and don't know about their gestures, you will find that making that extra effort can make you stand out from the crowd. How do I know their personality type? Now that you know the different personality types, the next problem you'll be tackling is, how do you make the distinction? Unfortunately, you can't just go up to people and ask them about their personality type. In fact, many people are unlikely to know about the MBTI or the Enneagram or other personality indicator types. Unless you're good friends with them, it's also unlikely that you can have them answer a questionnaire to determine their personality type. So what do we do then? We look at cues, behaviors, speech patterns, and the like in order to determine an individual's personality type. This can be difficult, and in all likelihood, you may not be 100% correct all the time, but it should be able to give you some idea. Chapter 3. Introverts, Identify, Communicate, and Personality Type Motivations. This chapter is going to delve deeper into personality types and how to make connections with people depending on their perceived personality types. I want to stress the use of the word perceive here because unless you've made them take a test to figure out their personality type, chances are you're going to be guessing what category they fall into. This is why this chapter also helps you with that particular problem. This chapter deals with personality types in 3 ways. The first one answers the question, what are the characteristics of a specific personality type? The second one answers the question, how do you communicate and connect with a specific personality type? This one will help you tailor your communication style to connect with this particular person. Remember, the whole goal of this book is to help you forge better relations with people. And finally, the third one answers the question, what is the typical motivation of this personality type? This is crucial because every person has a different motivation. Different personality types often have endgames or purposes when interacting with people. You will find that these different motivations can help you better figure out what they ultimately want in a given situation. In this chapter and the next one, we're going to answer the question, how do you identify an introvert or extrovert? As mentioned, people can be very good in hiding their actual personality preferences. Hence, an introvert may not always be sitting in the corner of the room. They may be in the center of action and simply doing their best extroverted act. Here are some signs that can help you identify these personality preferences and how to interact with them. Just a little preface before talking about spotting and communicating. I want you to take a good look at the classifications we've made in the previous chapter. This time, we won't stop at just the introvert and the extrovert. Instead, we're going to go a little bit further and talk about the different MBTI personalities and how you're supposed to communicate with them. After you've made identification, I want you to understand that it's not always easy to make a classification, especially if you're doing it for the first time. Some characteristics are completely internal, which means that you won't be able to quickly see it in the person's words and actions. Still, we're going to try our best to give you the best chance of connecting with people. Signs of an introvert. Zoning out in social situations. Introverts are likely to zone out during conversations or in the middle of all the parties. They can easily become quiet during conversations, as if they've mentally left the place. Don't worry, they'll come back sooner or later, often asking questions to help them catch up to the conversation. They're the ones who leave early. This doesn't happen just once but all the time during parties or any other social situation. Introverts are also the ones who tend to disappear during parties. They're the ones who gravitate towards the quieter part of the house, often grouping up with other introverts and just talking quietly in a private space. Often, introverts stick close to the people they already know. They're the ones who have an intense interest in books, the arts, or even the animals in the room. This kind of interest often allows them to be alone while still appearing as if they're enjoying themselves at the party. They can be quite irritable if you're together for long periods of time. This is because introverts often need downtime after socializing for quite some time. They're also the ones who are happy to lend a helping hand when it comes to activities that let them be alone. Hence, they can volunteer to serve the DJ, clean up the house, take food to someone, or even take photographs. This lets them stay clear from all the activities while still being part of the actual party. Introvert types according to the MBTI. INFJ, introvert, intuitive, feeling, judging. INFJs are big users of metaphors and symbols during conversations. They like to talk about insights, visions, and predictions, all while being emphatic and warm in their conversations. Being introverts, their conversational skills are best displayed in small circles or one-on-one interactions. Here are the typical characteristics of the INFJ. They talk using symbols and metaphors to really convey what they're trying to say. Their preferred topics of conversation revolve around visions of the future, predictions, and possibilities. They like to show solidarity with others by saying words like, "I understand," when in conversations. Well-mannered. INFJs are tactful and very adaptable. In fact, they can switch back and forth in social events, managing to establish rapport all the while. INFJs are introverted intuitive, which means that their process is mostly internal. This is why they like metaphors and symbols in conversations. When it comes to topics they're passionate about, they can be tough to understand. In fact, when it comes to certain topics, it appears as though they're only rambling when in truth, they're trying to process an idea. When confronted by a debate or an argument, the INFJs are the ones who prefer to take on the role of peacemakers. These personality types tend to flock to the following careers: missionaries, clergy, counselors, medical doctors, chiropractors, psychiatrists, writers, photographers, dentists, social workers, librarians, and education consultants. INEJ, introvert, intuitive, thinking, judging. INEJs are considered to be one of the rarest types in the MBTI scheme. This is why when you do finally meet one, there's a good chance that you will have a hard time understanding their personality. Here are the typical characteristics of an INEJ. INEJs are quiet and prefer to spend the day by themselves. When they do start talking, however, they prefer to focus on future events and enjoy discussing the many implications or meanings of events, topics, or situations. They tend to speak using lots of symbols or metaphors to describe things. They're the ones who often say phrases like, "If this happened, then that means that," as they like to establish connections between events in a logical but futuristic manner. They love to strategize and often focus on creating long-term solutions to problems. Because they're intuitive instead of being censors, it can be difficult for them to explain their thoughts and ideas to people. So be patient. Don't be surprised if you get lost when talking to an INEJ. They tend to go straight from point A to point D, skipping several letters along the way. Combined with their love for metaphors, it can be very confusing, especially if you're talking to one for the first time. They stick to logical and analytical modes of thinking. They can also be very direct to the point of being rude. Like other NTs, they like to process information quietly so that when they finally say something, they sound very sure of their conclusion. Common careers include professors, teachers, medical doctors, corporate strategists, engineers, computer programmers, photographers, managers, military, and research department managers. ISTJ, introvert, sensing, thinking, judging. They like to think before they speak, which seems true for all introvert types. You will notice how their body language shows they're mulling over a question or comment before they even respond. These are the kind of people who will take a long time composing a comment through Facebook and will review their message before eventually hitting send. Here are some of the characteristics of this type. They're the types who like to keep things as linear as possible. This means that during speeches or meetings, they're the types who recap conversations. They will repeat what another person said and then tack their comment at the end, just to make sure everyone is on the same page. They also like to connect current situations with past ones in order to make a correlation or to keep it factual. They'd say words like, "It looks like," or "It's the same as," or "Remember," when to keep the conversation grounded and make sure everyone can see the similarity or difference to a current situation. Typically, this is done to add some authority to their conclusions or ideas. When talking, they tend to focus on facts and rarely exaggerate what they're trying to say. This also means that their movements tend to be limited as they focus on the context of what they're trying to say. Note that these types are not big on facial expressions or body language, so you might have a harder time reading them. They don't like being the center of attention when in fact, they actually have an air of mystery on them that draws in people. Feelings and emotions are kept close and private by the ISTJ, so don't expect great shows of affection from them. They're not good with surprises, especially if they're socially accepted to respond with lots of emotions. These feelings are often reserved to really close people in their lives. These personality types are typically found in professions of business, administrators, dentists, programmers, lawyers, judges, accountants, detectives, math teachers, engineers, and technicians. ISTP, introvert, sensing, thinking, perceiving. ISTPs prefer to process their thoughts internally. You're not going to hear them reciting their analysis out loud, but instead keeping it secret and intact before talking. As a result, their words would be factual, direct, and concise, because they choose only to speak them out loud when they're already fully formed. Here's how to spot one out in the wild. They're the types who are likely to pause in the middle of a sentence in order to find the perfect word for what they're trying to say. Their vocabulary and phrasing is very precise as they want to keep things quick and simple. They're the ones who seem like they're very opinionated. This is because of their factual approach to any problem as well as the precision of their logic. Everything has been cross-checked before entering into any kind of debate or discussion. They're not afraid to raise issues if they see any, especially since their detailed sensory data manage to go through the logical pros and cons of a specific pathway. Because of their love for the logical and the concise, they're not very good with feelings or emotions. ISTPs will feel very out of place and ill at ease if asked to talk about their feelings. If pushed or in a very stressful situation, however, you might find that ISTPs suddenly become overly emotional even if it is out of their character. ISTP personality types tend to gravitate to careers like forensic, pathologists, system analysts, computer programmers, firefighters, paramedics, electrical engineers, pilots, and transportation operatives. Communicating with INFJs, INEJs, ISTJs, and ISTPs. When communicating with any person in this particular group, you want to remember that they're strong introverts. This means that their ability to maintain social communication is shorter. They often prefer their interactions to be quick and straight to the point. Here are some of the things you have to remember when communicating with any of these types. Don't ramble. They hate that. If you want to communicate specific information, tell it to them straight. Do not use small talk if you want to get information from them. Ask about it straight out, and you will get a straight answer from them. They may enjoy banter, but if they're working on a particular project, it's important to stay away and just allow them to focus. Learn to listen because these types put a lot of stock into listening. Remember that their main goal is information, so if someone is talking, they will make every effort to listen. Hence, they expect the same courtesy from others and hate it when people interrupt them in the middle of a sentence. Give them time to think about their answer before voicing it out loud. Greet them with a smile, but don't expect to stand there and exchange pleasantries. They're not really fond of that. Instead, greet them but give them their personal space. No hugs or any kind of air kisses unless you're very close or you're a family member. Eye contact every now and then is okay simply to affirm connection. Note that when on a project, they tend to be very focused. Any sort of distraction or effort to prevent them from finishing their goal will likely be dealt with negatively. Conversations of any sort will be shrugged off, as it only throws them off their focus. Do not rush them. As with other introverts, INTPs like to enjoy their time working on a project. They're careful and particular about their goals and believe that distractions can lower the precision of their executions. When working with this type, it helps to always update them of what's going on. They want to find out at what stage you are in your job and not only when it's finished. This helps them assess the situation and adjust accordingly. Note that these types can go quickly from friendly to distant. They have a short social fuse, which means that after some time socializing with others, they're going to need some alone time to recharge. True introverts, their social fuse tends to be shorter than most, unless they've managed to train themselves into it. During tense situations or when stressed, INTPs draw into themselves. They become quiet and stoic, unlike other types which tend to burst out or let everyone know what they're feeling. INFP, introverted, intuitive, feeling, perceiving, having a strong sense of personal values. INFPs are emphatic and imaginative. Their creative streak makes them very adept in discussing theoretical possibilities. Their favorite topics usually include how to help animals, how to help people, or even how to help the world completely. Here are typical characteristics of this personality type. They have strong values, but they're not the preachy type. They will keep their thoughts and beliefs close to heart unless specifically asked about them. They're the kind of people who let others live their lives and don't interfere unless they think they're in the position to make changes. Usually, this privilege is extended only to friends and relatives because of their belief in allowing people to express their individuality. INFPs are not very good in conversations when people try to impose their thoughts and ideas on others. They will have an internal cringe, or at worst, they might even confront another about it. Gentle and modest, they're often shy and prefer one-to-one conversations. At parties, they're going to be the ones who gravitate to the people they already know and spend most of the time in a quieter area of the house. You will often find them thriving in careers as writers, counselors, childcare workers, missionaries, psychiatrists, scientists, psychologists, education consultants, journalists, and social scientists. INTP, introvert, intuitive, thinking, perceiving. INTPs are pretty rare in the wild and have a very quiet personality. All their thought processes are done internally, which means that they'll only speak out their opinions after having an internal monologue in their head. Here are some signs of an INTP. They're very precise with words. They don't just think about the implications, but also how to word their thoughts in a way that keeps it brief and concise. This means that they take a long time to respond because they're looking for the perfect words to convey their meaning. They keep things logical and rarely venture towards emotions and feelings. In fact, they like to keep things on the topic at hand and don't like veering off into tangents. They're the kinds who categorize information into smaller pieces. This means that they will group information based on specific characteristics. This allows them to better remember information and create connections between different subjects because of their preference for categorization and connecting information with each other. It takes a fairly long time for INTPs to arrive at a conclusion. Once the planning is over, however, they will execute their plan to perfection and will not veer away from it. Give INTPs sufficient time to think about answers to questions. They don't like being pressured, especially when coming to a conclusion. They're outside-the-box thinkers, so don't be surprised if they sometimes put forward an idea that's out of this world. Be assured, however, that they thought about it first before voicing it. INTPs are not very good when it comes to expressing feelings and emotions, so unless you absolutely have to, try not to dwell too much about it during conversations. Common careers include chemists, photographers, biologists, mathematicians, computer programmers, university professors, forensic researchers, psychologists, artists, and social scientists. ISFJ, introvert, sensing, feeling, judging. They're a lot like ISTJs in that they think long and hard before talking. Do not rush them, as they want to delve into every possibility before deciding on a course of action. Here are the typical characteristics of the ISFJ. ISFJs like to keep a timeline in their head, which reflects when they speak. When trying to prove a point or conveying information, they will make use of past experiences of information to make their argument more believable. When talking, they often use words such as like, or reminds me of, or remember when. Unlike other introverts, ISFJs are actually very good in relaying empathy. This is their way of connecting with people or showing solidarity. They have a constantly professional and polite demeanor. They're actually quite responsive, but prefer one-on-one interactions over groups. Hence, these are the same people who will be looking for familiar faces in a party and spending most of their time in a quiet corner of the room. They're not very good with criticism and will often feel uncomfortable if made the subject of any. They can take these criticisms personally and will not do well in arguments or debates, even a friendly one. Hence, they're the type to think about past blunders over and over in their head. Note that long-range forecasting is not their forte. Unlike in T-types, who have no problem predicting possibilities, ISFJs like to keep their future predictions within safe short-term levels. However, their predictions are often good and well thought of. Common careers for this type include childcare, administrators, career counselors, clerical supervisors, police officers, church workers, and doctors. ISFP, introverted, sensing, feeling, and perceiving. The open-minded introverts who can be emphatic and easygoing if they feel like it. ISFPs can blend in with the extroverts, but not too much. They have strong values, but don't really want to show it on the surface unless they're in the company of someone they really trust. These are the kinds of people who respect the differences between people and will therefore not tell other people what they should or should not do. Sure, ISFPs may have a fairly good idea of what your next move should be, but they're not the types to give unsolicited advice. If you try to challenge their values, however, the ISFP will definitely fight with you in a tone of voice that is far from their usual character. Some characteristics of the ISFP are: they're quiet and honest with everyone they meet. During conversations, they're the ones who like to listen and seldom draw attention to their person. In fact, if they suddenly find themselves the center of attention, an ISFP will grow quiet. Believe it or not, ISFPs love adventure. They're the ones who enjoy going to concerts or vacations and will happily talk about them if given the chance. They also delve deeply into projects and can be quite impulsive, as they always want to add to their collection of memorable experiences. They're not really happy being in conflict-packed environments. They will actively put effort into avoiding these situations or making sure that they're not part of the conflict. ISFPs tend to be attracted to careers in music, art, childcare, social work, teaching, animal care, medicine, bookkeeping, and physical therapy. Communicating with INFPs, INTPs, ISFJs, and ISFBs. Communicating with these four types are more or less the same. Here are some tips when approaching or connecting with any of these types. Keep your greetings quiet and friendly. Try not to overload them with affection or be very public with your greetings. Take note that they have a fairly weird sense of humor. Their ability to distinguish between what's socially acceptable and what's not is a little vague, so try not to take them too seriously or too personally. Don't rush things with them. Never interrupt. Allow these types to fully say what they want to say before responding. Perhaps one of their biggest pet peeves is being interrupted while in the middle of a sentence. Give nods every now and then to let them know you're following the conversation. When push comes to shove, these personality types can become quite critical. Quality is more important than speed, so be prepared to revise and rework your output several times before you'll get their approval. Public recognition and compliments can be quite embarrassing and very uncomfortable for these types.